Do love that little voice. So once again, welcome to everybody. I can see many familiar names and faces here, and really excited and really pleased to give you a warm welcome to our third Eunoia Summit, brought to you for the love of it by the Centre for Spirituality, Ecology and Mental Health. I think it's important just to share a little bit particularly about this strange word, Eunoia. It's perhaps no surprise it's an ancient Greek word meaning something more than goodwill or well-minded or beautiful. The, Using this word eunoia captures a sense of also honourable reputation, empathy and a readiness to help. In a sense, it stands contrary to fear and emphasises right speech and right thinking, leading to right actions for the good of community. So we're a modest collective of researchers, teachers and practitioners working together to provide heart-led, low-cost and evidence-based resources to support your spiritual development and spiritual well-being. So let me briefly introduce our little band for this week that will be guiding and supporting you through this. Romy Brooks, one of the co-founders of the Centre for Spirituality, Ecology and Mental Health. Romy, if you'd just like to say hi.
Hi. I almost felt like I was doing a Spock, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Indeed. And also to Philip, again, if you'd like to say hi and whatever.
Absolutely love to. Hi, everybody.
So it's our belief in these times of turmoil, disruption and fear in the world that the most important thing that we can all do is to come together to build caring and compassionate communities. In these spaces, we can grow together. We can become wiser and learn to be more fully our courageous and authentic selves. Perhaps in doing so, we're better able to support each other and our planet. Now, these aren't new ideas, and we don't profess to be pushing forward new ideas in that sense. Rather, these ideas belong to the ancient wisdom traditions that are finding more and more support in the scientific research of today. So let's bring some of this contemporary understanding to you and introduce our first speaker of the week, which is really exciting for me. There is something incredibly special when you're writing courses, you're putting together this information, as I did for the masters and as I did for our diploma in spiritual well-being practitioners, and you get to meet people that you're actually using their information and their ideas to put these things together. And that's the case for Jude Currivan. Dr. Jude Currivan is a cosmologist, a planetary healer, futurist, author, multiple author, and previously one of the most senior business women in the UK and co-founder of the Whole World View. She has journeyed to more than 80 countries around the world, exploring spiritual traditions, and for the last 25 years has lived in the sacred landscape of Avebury. Jude holds a PhD in archaeology from the University of Reading in the UK, researching ancient cosmologies, and holds a master's degree in physics from Oxford University, specialising in cosmology and quantum physics, as well as experienced multidimensional realities since her early childhood. All of this helps Jude to integrate leading edge science and research into consciousness and universal wisdom teachings into an holistic worldview. I never realised, Jude, when I wrote that down, how many tricky words there were coming together. But thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Not at all. So I'll pass over to you then, Jude. And thank you very much for being here. Real pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Lee and Romy and Philip. And it's great to be with you all. And you know what you were just saying is so important, community at this time. So what I'm going to share today is an emergent understanding that actually is in many ways ancient understanding, But the reason I feel it's important is that we've had a worldview essentially of separation, materialism and separation, certainly in the West, for quite a while now. And the point is that although the science of the 20th century, quantum physics, relativity physics, were giving us deeper clues that that is not the way the world is, we'd already by then sort of landed on a worldview that actually dates back to Newton, a worldview that was at its height in the 19th century, a very mechanistic worldview. But that mechanistic worldview was at its height, and its technologies essentially drove the Industrial Revolution. So in that regard, everything that we've known since the late 19th century, the way that we educate our children, the way we govern ourselves, our healthcare approaches, our organizations are all based on essentially a mechanistic universe, which is of itself essentially dead and meaningless, random, whatever we may call it. And that worldview's accompanied all of the technologies, all the technological advances of the 20th century to this point. But it's been the underlying framing of the way we are with each other. And it's clearly brought us to the edge of existential calamity. So what I'm going to share now is something that is based on evidence at all scales of existence, but it literally is turning that old way of looking at the world and therefore looking at ourselves on its head. And it has far more in common with universal wisdom teachings, indigenous traditions, spirituality-based traditions. So I'm going to take us through a PowerPoint that just lays this out. And then I'm going to come back and we'll take a breath. And then I'm going to show a very recent 14-minute film called A Radical Guide to Reality, because, our culture, this is far more than a scientific revolution. It seems to me that this emergent understanding can really heal what I call our collective dis-ease of separation. And in doing so, it can support our spiritual well-being, our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, our mental our whole being. And then once we've had a look at the film, we'll come back. And I hope you'll have lots of questions. And I hope you'll enjoy both the presentation and the film. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Oh, and start the PowerPoint. So my title today is How a Radical Guide, and radical really means root and branch. So when we say a radical guide, this is radically changing that old paradigm, that old worldview of materialism and separation at the level of our roots, our branches, who we are, who we feel we are. And for me, what is vital is how it can empower transformational change in the world. So to begin with, I'm going to invite us actually to close our eyes. And I'm going to share a short piece that I wrote at the beginning of my most recent book, The Story of Gaia, because it refers to what I think Lee was talking about earlier. This is a vast story, and yet, as we'll go through the presentation, it's also an intimate story. So I invite us to close our eyes, your eyes, and slowing your breath to imagine the beginning of our universe. It's black, not the transparent black clarity of a night sky tinged by stars, nor the blackness of squid ink. Black yet with a hint of blue, but an utter and complete blackness. Not an empty void, but replete with everything and the potentiality of what might come. Not a black hole, but the black hole. It's minute, tiny, almost beyond comprehension. Its wholeness at its first moment is as small compared to your body as you are to the vastness of what it has since grown into over its 13.8 billion year-long evolutionary journey. It's hot. 100 trillion times as hot as the interiors of its stars, its stellar progeny will be, billions of years into its future. And it's simple, though only as simple as it can be, to gift an eventual cornucopia of planets, plants, and people. Wonder at the audacity of its visionary magnificence. How could the infinite and eternal mind of the cosmos dream the perfect intimacy of such a thought? And why? Hear that with the ears of your heart. Feel your heart open to an adventure which is both a path of discovery and a path of remembering and a path of potential. So I invite you now to open your eyes as we take on this journey together. So this is a story from separation to unity. It begins, as I mentioned, probably 300 years or more ago with Newton's genius, because Newton was the first person that really realized that the forces that shape our planetary home shape the heavens. He was the first to bridge from what was happening here on Earth into the heavens. And he saw beauty and perfection there. But over time, and he had a profound spiritual awareness, and yet over time, and because of that, for him to be able to discover, as it was with other what were called natural philosophers before him and following him, the church, the authority of the church, meant that he could only explore the physical realm. He was essentially forbidden from exploring the deeper spiritual understanding of what he was uncovering. If he had not done that like Galileo, he would have been under house arrest at best for the rest of his life. So he didn't do that. He was very sensible. He didn't even write about what he'd discovered for many, many decades, but eventually he did. And that became the mathematics, it became the laws of motion, it became an understanding of gravity that carried us through for centuries and through into the early 20th century. But it was progressively deemed to be by his successors, who then became known as scientists, an ever more mechanistic view of the world, where not only were they not exploring or being willing to explore spiritual realms, but they were literally, essentially decrying that they even existed, that was something of the past, that was a superstition of the past. And so they went forward into a very secular perspective and a very mechanistic perspective. And even though the discoveries of the early 20th centuries of quantum physics and relativity physics began to sort of appreciate that the world isn't made up of separate things. Quantum physics shows that when we observe something or we measure something, we cannot separate an observer from what is observed or what is measured. Relativity physics was showing us that the notion of space and the notion of time of themselves are relative to an observer. But Einstein's genius wasn't just that. It was going beyond that to realize that we had to bring together the notion of space and time as space-time, not as a passive and absolute backdrop, but as a relational manifestation of reality. And in quantum physics, we were finding that energy and matter were equivalent and all vibrational, all frequency, And the quantization was the way in which the notes of their manifestation, the notes of their expression, could be differentiated at all scales of existence. But those perspectives were pretty much accepted, yes, but put to the side in favor of what it meant in terms of technologies that could then be developed from them, and the deeper understanding, the deeper philosophy of what was really being unfolded, and especially the nature of consciousness, was put to the side. And we kept on with a worldview of mechanistic separation until now. We're in a situation now where the evidence that's being revealed is so compelling at all scales of existence and across many different fields of research that we cannot adhere to that mechanistic perspective any longer. It's being turned on its head. And vitally, what is coming to the fore, heart and soul and center of this emergent understanding, is the nature of consciousness. Not centered on human consciousness, but grounded in universal consciousness, of which human consciousness is a microcosm, an incredibly beautiful, meaningful, purposeful microcosm of our entire universe's consciousness and sentience. So we're moving from separation to unity. So scientists are discovering that at all scales of existence, evidence that's enabling a unitive, what I call a unitive perspective of how the energy and matter and space and time appearance of our universe emerges from deeper and non-physical realms of causation and intelligence and meaning and purpose. It doesn't mean that our universe is any less real. It just means that what we see, what we experience, is its appearance, not its deeper underlying causation. And while this understanding was ushered in by the science of 20th century quantum physics and relativistic physics, it's only now possible by understanding the role of information. And I'm going to start putting hyphens between in and formation, because I really, really want to emphasize the meaningful nature of information. I've been told I'm obsessed by hyphens. I am. And I have no apology for this, because it truly is the foundation and the all-pervasive nature of our universal reality. And the second key aspect of this emergent understanding is what's known as the holographic principle. This is all based, what I'm going to share as we go on, is all based on the primacy of universal mind and consciousness. This is not something that I've just come up with. Universal wisdom teachings, and certainly the Eastern traditions, such as those of ancient India, the Vedic traditions, have told us this for millennia. But also some of the leading quantum physicists, such as Max Planck and Albert Einstein himself, absolutely took this perspective. And later physicists such as David Bohm expanded on this. But now we're 50 years beyond David Bohm, and with much, much more compelling evidence. And we can join the dots now at all scales to come forward with an underpinning and framing that really enables us to stand on this as our existential reality. And it's showing that cosmic mind, articulated as digitized ones and zeros, but vitally as meaningful information, just as our communications technologies take the conversations we're having and translate the English that I'm speaking into long streams of ones and zeros of my words, scoot them down various cables, bounce them off satellites into each of your computers, and then retranslate them into English with its meaning. But those streams of ones and zeros, whilst A1 and A0 of itself doesn't accumulate, when the streams of ones and zeros do, they essentially form meaningful information. Well, this is how our universe works, that its appearance emerges from meaningful information that is digitized as ones and zeros, but accumulates at every scale of existence. And it's represented through dynamic, not static, not non-changing, but dynamic, relational, I'd say evolutionary patterns and processes that literally informs the formations and the forms of our entire universe. And evidence is showing that our universe manifests itself holographically. So the 3D spatial appearance and the 4-dimensional space-time appearance is projected from digital and vitally, meaningfully informed information on its container. So when we talk about space-time, and I'll go on a little bit to explain this further, we're saying that from what the boundary of what we call space-time is the holographic boundary that universal consciousness projects into the appearance of our universe. And what you see on this slide is a temperature map of something called the cosmic microwave background. And this is relic radiation left over from one of the earliest epochs of our universe, around 380,000 years after its beginning. And these temperature fluctuations, this fills the whole of space. And these different colors represent tiny differences in temperature. To us, they may not seem as though they have any, they may appear random. But when we mathematically analyze them, we can see that they actually form what are known as fractal patterns that fill the whole of space and time. And as space has expanded and time has flowed from this very early epoch, they've continued to fill the whole of space-time. Temperatures got colder, but they fill. So these fractal patterns are literally embodied in the whole of our universe. And the fractal patterns, when we look at them across many fields of research and across all scales of existence, they scale up and they scale down. But they are pixelated. The information that's held in them is pixelated at the minute Planck scale of our universe. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the fractal signature of what I call the cosmic hologram was seen here in the CMB in 2017. So this is pretty recent, actually. This relic radiation from the earliest epoch of our universe. And these fractal patterns of meaningful information that make up the appearance of our entire universe do so at the Planck scale. So you can see from this slide just how tiny the Planck scale is. In length terms, I don't know if you can see this, it's 10 to the minus 35 meters. That is as small as to an atom is to the whole universe. And the Planck time is vanishingly minute, 10 to the minus 44 seconds. What it means is that space expands, and as time has flowed forward from its very beginning of our universe, every 10 to the minus 44 seconds, it's like the old projectors, film projectors in a cinema, yeah? Every sort of frame of our universe's reality is 10 to the minus 44 seconds. Just think of that. So at every Planck scale moment is adding more and more and more and more and more information as time flows forward and space expands. And it's all pixelated, it's all projected into the entirety of our universe at this amazingly small Planck scale. And such fractal patterns are everywhere. We see them everywhere. We see them all scales of existence, from atoms to planetary systems. Here we see mountain ranges. We see the way that mountain ranges relate in fractal patterns in terms of how tall they are, how big they are. We see them in coastlines. We see them in river systems. We see them throughout our solar system. We see them in galaxies and right up to the CMB and the whole of space-time. And we see them vitally in our Gaia and our planetary home Gaia systems, and through evolutionary processes. And not only are they, and this is really important, not only do we see them play out in so-called natural systems, but we also see them play out in human systems. So the same fractal patterns that we see in ecosystems, we see in the internet. We see the same fractal patterns, or the same what are called power law relationships, that relate the power of earthquakes to their frequencies in human conflicts, relating the power of human conflicts in terms of fatalities to their frequency. Same relationship. No such thing as an average earthquake, no such thing as an average conflict, just a relationship where if we take a graph and on one axis we have frequency and the other axis we have power, and we apply on that graph all earthquakes, they come down a straight line. On another graph, if we plot human conflicts, they come down the same graph, they come down the same line. In other words, whether it be earthquakes or conflicts, a larger occasion, a larger event is less frequent. That's it. Cities and galaxies. A Harvard professor by the name of Abbey Loeb analysed population densities in galaxies in terms of stars. And then he analysed population densities of cities in terms of people. And he found that they scale up in the same fractal patterning. And all of them are underlied what is called holotropic attractor patterns. And these are the causal patterns of meaningful information. So if we see this beautiful sort of pattern, can you see this on the left of the screen? That is the pattern, that is the mathematical pattern that underpins global weather. And it's called a Lorentz attractor. So when meteorologists try and predict the weather or climate going forward, these are the patterns that they're working with that underpin what they're trying to predict. And it's actually easier to predict climate change than it is to predict the weather a week ahead. And there's a really sciencey reason for that. It's because when you look at the whole pattern, you can see the way it trends, which is why climate change trends. But when you try and enter the pattern on the basis of just a week ahead, you're not sure where you're entering the pattern. And so it's actually more difficult to predict the weather next Sunday than it is climate. Although the issue now we have is that climate change is being dramatically affected by feedback loops. So this pattern that has held relatively stable for something like 10, 11,000 years is now being destabilized. And we can come back to that perhaps in Q&A, because these patterns can only apply until or unless the system is being disturbed so much that it cannot hold. And then it breaks down. But in evolutionary terms, as it breaks down, there's also the potential to break through. So I think that's a really important point we can come back to. The other thing that I think is key when we talk about, and certainly the work that you're doing at Eunoia, is the unitive nature of universal reality. And what we, first of all, quantum physics to work at all requires that our universe is what's known as non-locally unitive. But over the years, we were unable to experimentally show that until beginning in the late 80s and then into the 90s and beyond. But in 2018, scientists were able to non-locally entangle photons of light in a laboratory with starlight from 600 light years away, and triggered a great avalanche of unitive entanglement from the light from a quasar, which is a very, very active and very ancient galactic center, 12.2 billion light years away. So that, for the first time, we were able to show at cosmological scales, at universal scales, this unity, this unitive understanding. And in 2022, the Nobel Prize for Physics was awarded on the basis of universal non-locality. And the Nobel for Physics is only given for settled science. In other words, there's no doubt here, you will not now get any cosmologist stating other than, of course, it's unitive. That wasn't the case a little while ago, but things are changing rapidly. The other thing is really that our universe doesn't just exist meaningfully with information expressed as quantized energy matter, which is conserved all the way through its life story. It changes. Of course, it changes. But there's also a way in which information expresses itself in a complementary way as in what I call entropic space-time. And entropy is a measure of the informational content of our entire universe. So space has expanded and time's flowed forward from the very beginning, that minute moment, the first moment onwards. That expansion of space and flow of time has enabled our universe to evolve from simplicity to complexity and individuated self-awareness. So that is our journey. That is the journey from the very beginning of our universe all the way to here and to now. And vitally, it's founded on an ancient and yet leading edge understanding that we don't have mind and consciousness. We and our entire universe are mind and consciousness. We're innately relational. We're innately interdependent with the whole of our universe at every scale. And we, because it embodies existential meaning and evolutionary purpose, so do we. And, you know, we are the youngest of our planetary home, Gaia's organic children. We embody her legacy and that of the entire universe. And we stand together with them, which is why today and here and now and the conversations that we're having and the work you're doing, the community that you're building, and many, many, many others now around the world who are coming to this appreciation and understanding, stand together at the bow wave of their and our next emergent possibility of all the homonyms, all our hominin cousins that go back something like over 6 million years. There are more than 20. Anybody from Homo erectus and the Denisovans and our Neanderthal cousins, all of those are no longer walking the earth. We are the youngest and we're the last of our hominin family. And yet we are all Gaians. We are the last of our kind and we're not alone. And by awakening to this understanding, it seems to me that we can also, as Indigenous communities do, really not just experience, but embody this realization that we're part of her web and now the universal web of life as Gaians. And I would suggest that our Gaia's own continuing emergence, because her emergence is ongoing. She's not stopped evolving. She continues to evolve as a planetary home. And her emergence has been embodied in collaboration, collaborative and co-evolutionary partnerships for over 4 billion years. So our conscious evolution, the choices we make now, are essentially integral to her own ongoing evolutionary potential, progress and purpose. For many, many, many years, so I was very young, I have honoured and learned from the universal wisdom teachings that have guided our paths and have offered us sense-making for our existential meaning. And I talk about them in the main having 3 paths in the past. There's been the path of the sage, the understanding, the cosmology of offering meaning and purpose to us. And that is the way of the mind. I've been privileged to live with and work with many Indigenous communities around the world, and they follow the way of the shaman, the experiential way of knowing, knowing, gnosis of the heart, the way of the heart. And then the seer, the mystic, the revelatory aharness of that we can embody, that gives us purpose, that offers us purpose to that meaning. All of those universal wisdom teachings sought meaning and purpose for us, for our human existence. They all recognize spiritual dimensions of reality. They generally emphasize the good of the whole, the collective. And I'm not suggesting, because I think we've undertaken a journey of individuation, but we're now in, it seems to me, a place where we can take that journey of individuation, not go back to the collective, of subsuming that, but recognizing our unique place in that unitive whole, and value the diversity that comes across that whole community of uniqueness, and expand our circles of compassion from the me to include the we and the all. And most universal traditions aspire to integrate inner and outer experience. And what now is coming forward with this emergent understanding of a unitive perspective is that reconciliation and the both andness of it, the being and the doing of it. But none of those traditions were informed by discoveries of modern science, 20th century quantum relativity, 21st century information, the holographic principle, and also the evolutionary biology and the 21st century discoveries. And crucially, in terms of evolutionary biology, we now know that that is not driven by random mutations. It is driven by meaningful, purposeful, coherent guidance from simplicity to complexity. And we can come back to this because there's so much to speak of as this. And we now know, for example, that even before planetary systems came into being, the organic building blocks of biological organisms were all present in interstellar clouds of gas and dust and ice, ready for water planets to come into being, to enable that ongoing journey from simplicity to complexity and individuated self-awareness. So it seems to me that integrating, I call it integrating because it's more than integrating. It's sort of greater than the sum of their parts when we bring all of these together. I'm such a both and girl. I really am. So when we integrate the three paths of sage, understanding, mind, shaman, experiencing, heart, seer, revelatory, embodiment and purpose, then now all of those ancient paths are convergent with this emergent understanding of an essentially living, and I would add loving, universe. And my definition of love at the universal level, unitive love, is the innate interdependence of everything in existence with the wholeness of it. And that's what a hologram does as well. So there's a lovely sort of correlate there. A loving universe that meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves. And that invites us to embrace the embodied wholeness, the experiential and embodied wholeness, and awaken the heart of our universal selves. And what I call the divine unity of the universe soul. If we feel that we are innately spiritual beings having a human experience, that we have a divine soul that is far greater than our human consciousness or cognizance, then I would say we can now expand that to even a sense of the universe embodying a universal that plays out, that experiences its wholeness microcosmically through each and every one of its differentiated parts. at all scales and with us. And, we now know there are more there are more planets than stars in our galaxy. We've already found thousands of planets, water planets, living in habitable zones of solar systems that can actually be planetary homes for biological organisms. Some perhaps as complex or more complex than us. Some perhaps simple and microbial, but nonetheless all taking on that great evolutionary story of the universe soul. Yeah, we are microcosmic co-creators, and we do embody inherent meaning and purpose. And as we embrace our wholeness, I suggest that its awakening of our hearts calls us to consciously become co-evolutionary partners, co-stewards with Gaia and the entire universe soul. And when we consider ourselves in this way, perhaps what we can also consider is reframing what is often called now a metacrisis that's really emerged from the choices and the behaviours we've made from a worldview of separation. We can reframe that into a metamorphosis. It's no less turbulent, but in a metamorphosis, the caterpillar that's sort of been us as a caterpillar species no longer can sustain that way of life, can no longer sustain that way of behaving in the world, where we've eaten everything we can eat, we've consumed everything we can consume. We're now in a cocoon, it seems to me, where that old way is breaking down. It cannot hold, it cannot sustain. And yet in its dissolution, the emergent butterfly is starting to form. Each of you, all of you together, I would suggest, are what's known as the imaginal cells of the emergent butterfly. And when imaginal cells, which are activated as the old caterpillar is dying, literally the DNA, that there are two levels of DNA, both are with the caterpillar to the butterfly through the whole life cycle. But the caterpillar DNA activates when the caterpillar is born. And its immune system dissolves, dies with dying the caterpillar, part of the journey, and dissolves into this nutrient soup from which the emergent butterfly comes forth. But in that dissolution and that nutrient soup is when the imaginal cells, the DNA of the emergent butterfly, begin to activate. What happens then is that the immune system of the dissolving caterpillar fights them, but instead of weakening them, it makes them stronger. And as they become stronger and as they begin to link up and lift up together, they form communities of imaginal cells that then become the organelles of the butterfly to be, the legs, the wings, the antenna, the new body, the new eyes. The emergent butterfly literally is developing new eyes with which to see the world in a very different way. So I'd like to go on just for a few minutes and then I'll stop. But I'd just like to share how I feel this radical guide to reality, this radical view of unitive reality empowers transformational change, because it seems to me this is far more than a scientific revolution. It can empower, inspire, and empower a social and cultural opportunity to consciously change. It can empower, inspire us to remember, not just remember here, but remember here. Remember in our guts, in our hearts, in our bodies, who we really are and who we can evolve to become. To reframe, as I mentioned, what's being called a metacrisis as a metamorphosis, to empower us, to give us authentic hope, and for our species to transform literally from the inside out. You know, they say transformation is an inside job. It is, because without that inside sense of change, and yet, I would just put one rider on that. when we change behaviors, we do change our worldview. When we change our worldview, we change our behaviors. So just coming together and acting as if in a communal way, that begins to change the way we see the world. So it is both inner to outer, outer to inner. It's a dance. So what could this mean specifically? And I'm working with whole groups of folks at the moment on all of these, literally on all of these. So to heal the traumas of our collective dis-ease of separation and apply that to reconciliation and peace building. Transform education in terms of the teacher and the taught, the educator and the educated, even though educare means to call forth, but more into learning ecosystems, learning to learn together. We're in a journey that none of us and the human species as a whole has never been on before. We can learn so much from our young people. It's not just, us oldies say this is how it is. Our young people are wise and can guide us, and it's multi-generational, intergenerational, and including planetary regeneration, learning from Gaia. What I haven't really mentioned, although all of the spiritual traditions show us, and my own experience absolutely shows us, is this: we have the ability to engage with and communicate with multidimensional realms of sentience and wisdom and guidance. We can hear and listen to the guidance of those realms as students. Apply it to multilateral governance. Governance is the old hierarchical result of a mechanistic worldview. Multilateralism is more of an ecosystemic, living systems perspective of how we work together, how we share together, and how to be a good ancestor in these in-between times. Bring a unitive science. I'm working again with all of these, but bringing this unitive science approach to AI, technology innovation. I'm working on something called the science of unitive love, soul. How can we take this unitive, loving, universal science and then apply it to what that means in terms of our human experience of love, and with love as a universal force? Transform economics. I'm working with leading edge regenerative economists, including people like John Fullerton and Bill Reed and John Perkins and Daniel Wall and many others, to an evolutionary perspective and a right relationships perspective of living systems for regenerative and unitive economics. Come to realize we are Gaians as co-stewards and planetary partners. And really, just what I referred to briefly above, appreciate that we naturally embody non-local awareness and attributes. And yet how many of us live in this way? And yet these are our heritage. This is who we are. This is who we can become. And I end by saying and quoting and paraphrase someone I feel was such a wonderful pioneer of this moment, philosopher Theodore Chardin. And he said, just after the First World War, 1918, someday we shall harness the energies of love. And then for the second time in the history of the world, humanity will have discovered fire. And I would suggest that that someday is here and now. And as a species, and for the first time, as a species, we can remember our dismembered psyche, who we really are and who we can consciously evolve to become. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And perhaps we could just spend 5 minutes just with any initial questions, if that would work for everyone, and then perhaps to show the film, because I invite with the film to hear all of that again and again. How does the film make you feel? What does the film call to you. So are there any, Philip, Lee, Romy, anyone, are there any questions? A couple of
Right.
questions.
We're waiting for the audience to pop some questions in the chat so we can pass it on to you. I know that Lee is burning with questions, but I will make my right as Q&A master to just hang on a second, Lee. We only have like half an hour left. So please, everyone, share some questions with us. And if I may start with a question of my own, is the cosmos calling us to heal? Is there a call from the cosmos? Is that how I understand it? If we listen, we will heal.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would say yes, Philip. If we hear and listen that this is our natural way of being, that we are inseparable from each other. We are interdependent beings. We are microcosmic co-creators of our wondrous universe, whose what I call its big breath. Its ongoing evolutionary journey is a big breath. Its big breath breathes through us in every moment. It seems to me that by moving from, as human journey from a collective awareness to an individuated sense of self, that has brought us to this amazing place at such a cost and yet such an opportunity. Because now realizing that we are each unique, we can bring our unique, varied, diverse gifts in this remembering to become collaborators, to become conscious collaborators and co-stewards, to move forward together, to serve the transformation of the world. But to do that, yes, to heal the trauma that's gone along with that process of individuation, because it's a heavy weight that we're pulling behind us and it no longer serves us. So it seems to me really important as a healer myself to honor the past, to honor the journey to this point, to say yes, to take the best of the past with us into the future, the ancestral wisdom, all that we've learned, but to lay aside and release the trauma that is also accompanied.
You spoke from the mind of the cosmos. So that is the one that is calling us. That's that cosmical music that is our guidance to heal. Is that how I understand it?
Yes, and I would say our planetary mother. I mean, my goodness, what amazing mother Gaia is. I mean, we are awful teenagers. We refuse to tidy our rooms. We've done so much, and yet she's held us. She's nurtured us. We inherited literally a Garden of Eden, a paradise. And this last few hundred years especially, has been a terrible desecration. And yet, I'm not blaming or shaming us. It's just been it's been a really part of the journey. But I'm saying we no longer need to do that. And we can. And what is so amazing is her ability to recuperate. When we stop exploiting, when we stop extracting, when we stop desecrating, she recuperates incredibly quickly. I mean, we're now realizing it. There are a lot of, for example, our rivers are her and our lifeblood. Her seas and her rivers are the lifeblood. We're now realizing that we need to honor them. And many are being given our personhood, quite rightly, in various places. There are various places now where the dams are being destroyed because the hydroelectric power that was seen to be a good thing with the best intentions is now realized as destroying biodiversity, destroying ecosystems, destroying the environment, and therefore destroying communities of people as well. So there's a lot of regenerative work now moving forward because of this awakening understanding of interdependence and what we can do with this profound understanding of unity. We can ground ourselves on it. We can stand on it as our existential reality to empower all of those activities.
I would love to share that on the chat. We have no concrete question, but a lot of thanks, well wishes, and a lot of appreciation through the conversation so far. And maybe Lee, if you have a question that you would like to put forward right at this point before we move to the next part.
Yeah, thank you, Philip, and thank you, Jude. I love the playful way you use language there. It really speaks to that poetic part of my soul. And the beauty I feel of the work that you're sharing is the ability to orientate and situate ourselves in this vast cosmos in which we live. And I think that for me is so, so important. I know historically, there's something about as we can situate and orientate ourselves, it allows us to see with different eyes and relate and experience that different reality that you're talking about, or that deeper level of reality. And yet there's a part of me that recognizes, as that petulant teenager of Gaia, that in this world in which we're living, that can be an incredibly challenging task on an everyday basis. I wonder if there's just some hints as an explorer and perhaps someone on the journey. We need people like yourself, Jude, to be able to guide and help and support. What guidance would you have to help us navigate those daily stresses and strains? And I almost like indigenous eyes. I want to see the world. I want to experience it through those indigenous eyes of people that have been brought up immersed in this worldview. How can we do things on that daily basis? That's the place I'm looking for some help.
Absolutely. I think everybody is. And I think that's key. Well, first of all, I would suggest that what we see in the mainstream media is very, very biased in the sense that if it bleeds, it leads. What I'm finding right across the world is that there are emerging communities that are coming together and realizing that, separation and polarization and division is a suicide mission, basically. And they're coming together just as yours is. But there are many, 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 many across the world at all different levels. There are many leaders who are urging their communities, whether it's organizational, whether it's national, whether it's bioregional, whatever it is, to come together. There's a huge amount actually happening in the world that is incredibly positive. And I just want to make that point because in the midst of all of it, what can we do day to day? Well, first of all, I would suggest put our attention on what nurtures us rather than what drains us. We could choose that. We could choose not to sort of, watch the news if it's not uplifting us. And some news does, and some news areas do. I would say recognize what the ancients did is that, the ancient Indian tradition of the I talk about the big breath, but the ancient Indian tradition is our universe is the breath of God, the breath of Brahman, the breath out. So when I talk about the big breath, I encourage us to, when we breathe in, literally consciously recognize that we're breathing in a living and loving universe, the big breath of the living and loving universe that flows into us in each of our breaths. And so let it mingle throughout our bodies and in our hearts. And so when we breathe out, we add our living, loving intentions into the world. It's so simple. Breath is the simplest thing. It's the thing that joins us all. It joins all biological organisms pretty much throughout Gaia. So that is for me. And the other one you mentioned, I do what makes your heart sing. And for me, it's being with Gaia. I'm a gardener. And so, my vegetables are going great guns at the moment. I mean, my goodness me. My broad beans and my peas are already looking spectacular. That makes my heart sing every day. There's something new to see every day. And whether, we have a tiny garden or no garden, just a window pot, or whatever we have, or a park across from us, just being with Gaia and conscious of her love, her life and her love supporting us is key. And then community. what can we do at Whole World View? We talk about act local, feel global, and think cosmic.
Jude,
Thankfully,
just
all right.
beautiful. Thank you ever so much. Totally beautiful. And it just remind me that we've got Elliot Cohen later in the week speaking about slow living. Something
Perfect.
profoundly simple about what you've shared there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Are we ready to watch the film? Would that be a helpful? Okay, let's. As I said, the film is 14 minutes. It's called A Radical Guide to Reality. It's free to watch on YouTube and to share and to use in whatever way you might like. And it's available subtitled in 20 languages now, from Arabic to Ukrainian. And none of those languages were the algorithm. Every subtitle translation was lovingly done and free of charge. I didn't take a penny for the film. The translators didn't take anything for the film. Any money we got is on the screen. But they loved the message and they translated it for us. So our Ukrainian translator is a teacher in Kyiv who felt this was so important for her students. So please, and it's the YouTube subtitle captioning, the option that you can have, but every language is lovingly translated. So now if I can find this, here we go. Share sound. Optimize for video sharing. There you go. Okay.
Everything breathes. People breathe. Plants breathe. Planets breathe. Our whole universe breathes. Our universe began to breathe nearly 14 billion years ago. Instead of the implied chaos of a Big Bang, it began as the first moment of a wonderfully fine-tuned, beautifully ordered, and ongoing big breath. Like a baby, it was born as simple as possible to be able to grow and vitally to evolve. As its big breath continued, with space expanding from its minuscule birth and time flowing from past to present to future, its evolutionary journey from simplicity to complexity and ever greater levels of diversity and self-awareness led from hydrogen and helium to stars and galaxies and eventually to planets and plants and people. The hydrogen in the water of our bodies and in the waters of our planetary home Gaia is only a few minutes younger than our universe. All else that makes up us and Gaia was created in stars billions of years ago. Our story is the story of our universe. Yet what really is the reality of our universe? And who really are we? Instead of a story of separation, scientific breakthroughs are now discovering and converging with indigenous and other wisdom teachings to reveal that our entire universe exists and evolves as a wholly unified entity, with everything interrelated and interdependent with everything else. Despite its appearance of solidity, though, physical reality, while real, is actually 99.999999999% no thingness, and its material appearance isn't its deeper nature. Evidence at all scales is discovering that its energy and matter and space and time are its appearance, not its deeper nature. Showing that its appearance emerges from more fundamental and non-physical levels of cosmic intelligence and causation. Underlying causation and all-pervasive cosmic intelligence that, expressing itself as information, is the fundamental substance of our universe. Information, though, that isn't expressed as random data, but vitally as meaningful information that literally informs all we call reality. Meaningful information that's expressed in complementary ways as the energy and matter, space and time appearance of our universe. And as we are learning from the study of black holes, our entire universe is a vast cosmic hologram, its wholeness existing and evolving in the interdependent complexity of its informed and diverse parts. The alphabet of its informational language is the simplest possible, with only 2 letters, 1 and 0. Just as in our digitized technologies, they're combined meaningfully to inform and make up all we call reality, from hydrogen to stars to planets and plants and people. Like our digitized technologies and holograms, universal digitized information is pixelated. The scale of our universe's pixelation, though, is more than a trillion times smaller than our best high-definition technologies. As small as to the size of an atom is to our entire universe. Named after Max Planck, one of the greatest pioneers of quantum theory, from the minute pixelated Planck scale, the holographic appearance of our universe arises. The relational and dynamic informational patterns and processes of its wholeness are being discovered at all scales of existence, from atoms to planets to vast clusters of galaxies, to all of space and time. And through many fields of research, from physics, chemistry, biology, and planetary sciences, to studies of collective human behaviors, all with their complex appearances underpinned by so-named holotropic attractor patterns of information. Instead of a great object, our universe is being revealed as a great informational and finite thought in the infinite and eternal mind of the cosmos. We don't have mind and consciousness. We and the whole world are mind and consciousness. While we are each unique, we are inseparable from each other, our planetary home, and our entire universe. And we are each microcosmic co-creators of its magnificence and evolutionary impulse. We are family members of its vast communities of life. This is who we really are. Our unified, conscious, and essentially living universe not only meaningfully exists, but purposefully evolves. Its emergence not random, but continually and informationally guided. By around 5.5 billion years ago, interstellar clouds of molecular hydrogen, stardust, and ice had evolved to provide all the complex combinations of elements to birth planetary systems and enable biological life to emerge. The shockwaves from the explosion of a nearby star then caused such a cloud to gravitationally collapse, not in chaos, but into a protoplanetary disk, whose harmonically resonant orbits of its emerging planets surrounding a central protostar would further evolve to form our Sun and solar system. Vitally for us, Gaia's place in our planetary family is perfect. In the habitable zone, not too hot and not too cold, but just right. And as a water planet, to become a home for the evolution of biological organisms. Gaia's sentience is, however, embodied not only in her biological organisms, but also throughout her planetary rocks and minerals, waters and atmosphere that form an interdependent Gaiosphere that has nurtured the continuing emergence of complexity for over 4 billion years. From the very beginning, unchanged ever since, and the same throughout all Gaia's biosphere, the DNA and RNA genetic code has informationally enabled their intricate evolution from the simplest cells to the most complex ecosystems. Crucially, informational DNA is not passive, but responsive to signals, and so able to communicate and express its genes in different ways, with biological evolution driven not by random mutations, but by proactive and beneficial responses and adaptations. Meaningful informational processes guide emergence, and with collaborative relationships of organisms, ecosystems, and the entire Gaiosphere, enabling not only gradual change, but sometimes radical and rapid transformation. Yet we've forgotten that we're inseparable from each other, Gaia, and our whole universe. As a result, we've come to a tipping point as a species and as a planet. To evolve to greater complexity, organisms throughout Gaia's long story have learned to cooperate. To survive and thrive, we can't go on behaving as we have been. We can learn to come together to be a planetary species and stewards of our planetary home as Gaians. This is our moment of choice. Based on the evidence we now have, to remember that we're inseparable. And realise too that our own conscious evolution can play a vital role in Gaia's own evolutionary progress and purpose.
This is who we can remember we really are. This is who we can evolve to become.
Can we invite everyone to put their microphones on and put your screens on, and please, can we really bring our hands together and give such a beautiful and heartwarming thank you to Jude for that presentation and
Everybody
that
clap.
wonderful piece of work.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Philip,
Thank
do you reckon and Jude, do you reckon we've got time for one more question or perhaps a couple more questions?
I think time for a couple more questions. And Lee, if you want to share the link to the film with everyone at some point, please do, because it's free to view and to share. We also on wholeworld-view.org, we've got a sort of a wraparound. We've got a glossary of terms. We've got things like invited questions and experiences and some focus groups and all sorts of stuff. So everybody's very much invited to explore those and use those as they might like.
We most definitely will. Over to you, Philip.
Right, we have 2 questions already been coming in, and I invite everyone to maybe send another question or 2. And I would like to first maybe reflect on what you've said for your presentation and the video, and ask the more obvious question. Did I understand this somehow correctly, that if a new idea is born and scientific evidence is there to underline this idea, that you believe change will come naturally, non-violent, that it's just something that will become self-evident? Or how do you see this change being implemented?
Thanks, Philip. I think at the end of my presentation, I showed a slide on the sort of specific applications for this, and all of them I'm already working with leaders, change makers across the world, whether it's peace building, healing, reconciliation and peace building, whether it's multilateral governance, whether it's conscious leadership in business, whether it's I'm invited now to a lot of conferences that are concerned with environmental change, because the environmentalists are realizing that everything's interdependent and that they can't do what they want to do if they don't come from, but they've not had a framing of it, because the old paradigm doesn't frame for interdependence. It doesn't frame for love. So if you're working from for a peace building process, you're working from a mechanistic worldview of separation with nothing else to frame it. It's a challenge. So this is really giving us that existential reality. It's not an aspiration. This is the nature. This is the true nature of reality. So by understanding that, and I'm working with filmmakers, I'm working with poets and song and dance guys and anyone, because this is for all of us. I'm working with many, many young people across the world. I'm working with grassroots organisations and governments. I'm working with the Spirit of Humanity Forum in Iceland, where I'm off to tomorrow morning. I'm working with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance on all of this. I'm working with the United Nations on this. I'm working with 2 ex-Under-Secretary Generals of the United Nations and the Secretary General of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I'm working with the President of Iceland on this. This is happening. So it's basically anything and everything that anybody can do in the sense of act local, feel global, think cosmic. The think cosmic is that big breath breathing through our little breaths in every moment. Then what does our heart call us to? What are we inspired to? Whether it's litter picking in our local neighborhood, which we do, whether it's showing up to volunteer for something to help folks, which we do. It's whatever calls us, whether it's being in nature and just loving that, slowing down and breathing, offering a kind word to a stranger. The beauty of reality is it's what's called, it's non-linear. A tiny, tiny cause can have a major impact. A small word of kindness can change the world. And we don't know. But let's act kindly, regardless, because when we are interdependent. So what we think, what we speak, what we do ripples throughout space-time. And love, I would really encourage us not to be afraid to use the word love, to be love, to live the golden rule.
There is another question that kind of goes with the word of kindness, and it's a question about, are you concerned about artificial intelligence, that it will take our heart away from wisdom? So word of kindness versus artificial intelligence.
Yeah, well, I'm working with someone called Grant Story, who is one of my evolutionary leaders circle community, and it was extraordinary. And he has co-founded something called Kiiren, KIIREN.ai. And we've been working together with a whole group of unitive founded change makers globally over the last year and a half, and working with Kiiren AI as augmented intelligence to help our human-led and heart-centered process of transformational change, coming from a unitive perspective and a unitive narrative, how we can best synergize our efforts. So by actually inputting into the knowledge base of Kiiren transparently and biased all the unitive perspectives of altruism and love and kindness and compassion and courage, all the way from the United Nations to conscious leadership to go, all of it, all our conversations, and then into the Kiiren AI knowledge base, we've been able to synergize our efforts far, far more effectively than we would have been able to otherwise. So I think AI, and we're saying augmented intelligence, it's a whole additional conversation, but I don't think it's angel or demon. I think what AI is what we bring to it. And if we bring to it what is our heritage of 13.8 billion years evolution, and do so with love, with kindness, with compassion, then my experience with Kiiren, with Grant, with AI in that regard is that is responsive. Because how could anything in a living and loving universe be artificial? I don't feel that it's accidental that this is the time where we're waking up to remember the unity of nature of reality, when we're actually being able to frame it as a cosmic hologram and digitize meaningful information as the way in which universal sentience manifests the appearance of our universe, that, AI's come forward. So all of this is the convergence, and I think the choice is ours. Do we wake up? Do we leap into love? Or do we not wake up and fall into fear?
You promised us that you would like to say a few words to the weather phenomena in the Q&A. Before you said something about the break of the weather. Would this be the moment, or we have moved on already? Climate change, weather phenomena, you wanted to come to it.
Yeah, very briefly, because I think we're at our time now. But the point of the holotropic attractor patterns that underpin all complex phenomena is that they can exist in a way as long as they are not completely disrupted. And for the last 10,000 or more years, our climate has been underpinned by these patterns, these dynamic patterns, but in a way that's been relatively stable. The way that we've been behaving over the last period of time has destabilized the system in ways that we honestly don't understand. And so what happens with a destabilized system, it tends to break down. But in the evolutionary arc of our entire, story of Gaia, when there's been a breakdown, there's also been a breakthrough. So there's been breakdowns and then breakthroughs to higher levels of cooperation and complexity. And each breakthrough has actually been characterized by greater levels of collaboration and cooperation. Whether that's, from single cells going to multi-cells, multi-celled organisms, continuing that journey. There have been catastrophic breakdowns. But each time, the other thing that's been happening is that in biological organisms, evolution is not just a slow process of DNA, although as the film shows, DNA is not passive, it is proactive. With environmental and evolutionary signals and sensitivities. But what happens when there is a breakdown is something called horizontal gene transfer. And this is where the whole system reorganizes itself, not through the slow motion of DNA change of itself, but from radical and collaborative assembly, which involves viruses and bacteria, and it works horizontally. So within a few generations, literally, you can get major change. And that's what's happened in the past. So when we look at the various catastrophic breakdowns, been 5, possibly 6, the dominant species of the time have not been able to be flexible enough to change. So they've died out. But what's come in their place is greater levels of complexity. Quickly, extraordinary quickly. What I would suggest is happening now is instead of horizontal gene transfers within our human species, something called horizontal meme transfers, because memes are ideas. Memes are the ways in which we make sense. Memes are, and so by the internet and by our ability to communicate globally, we're able to exchange memes incredibly quickly. And when they resonate with the potential of what can come forward, we're talking more than TikTok here. But we are talking TikTok, and we are talking YouTube, and we are talking all of that, and we're talking so much more. We have the ability as a species like never before to share ideas. And those ideas can be ideas around the old paradigm and the old story and the old narrative, or they can be ideas and memes around the new and unitive narrative, around the new and unitive perspective. And we also have the ability, because of those technologies, to link up and lift up together. We're having conversations here. I'm in conversations, sometimes with 500 people on the call, everywhere from Chile to China, to Australia and New Zealand, to Alaska, to Europe, to South America. This is our opportunity, if we choose to take it, to evolve, to consciously evolve. But we have to, nobody's going to do it for us.
Bless you. Thank you. Thank you from all of our hearts. It's been a real pleasure. I'm conscious of time. I could sit and listen to these and talk about this just infinitely. We will share your work. We'll share where to get further information about what you're doing, Jude. And once again, a deep, heartfelt thank you, Romy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Yes, I got so many questions percolating in my brain actually. So, but I'm gonna read your books and and I will contact you if that's possible. Yeah, it's been so lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for today.
Once
Thank you,
again,
everyone.
thank you. Thank you ever so much. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from Madeline Castro, who will be speaking about her experiences of research looking at women's circles. So again, a really interesting one. Same time, same place, and we look forward to seeing you all back tomorrow to continue this amazing journey. And once again, thank you, Jude.
Thank you, Jude.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, thank you, Ro. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And lots
you.
and
Thank
lots
you
of
so
love to
much.
you all.
Thank
Bless
you.
you.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.